Welcome to another episode of the Upper Bowl Perspective, a Utah Jazz podcast showing that the fans sitting in the nosebleeds know just as much as those sitting courtside. And talking about fans, we want to start this episode just on thanking all of you for everything you've done with our channel so far. Our last few videos, we've had more comments, we've had more views than we've ever had. So we just wanted to give a huge shout out to everyone for interacting with us. We love talking Jazz. We love talking Jazz with you. So if you like what we do, if you like our takes, or you just want to hear more of what we're doing, best way you can help us, like the video, subscribe to our channel. It helps us more than you could know. But now that we've got that part of the podcast out of the way, let's start talking about what we love to talk about the most, which is the Utah Jazz. And we are now just a few short days from one of our favorite nights of the year, the NBA draft. So in honor of this being our last pre-draft podcast, we're not doing 2 segments today. We're actually going to bring 3. In our first segment, we're going to do a mock draft of picks 1 through 15, and then we'll talk about who's available for the Jazz at 16. In part 2, we have some would you rathers for each other that we're going to throw out about the draft. And then in the third segment, we're going to go over our big boards. We've got a more or less finalized on our end, and we're definitely far apart on a few of these prospects. So we're excited to see why we view differently on some of these prospects that could definitely be there for the Jazz at 16 or at 28. So let's go ahead and get started with the mock draft. This is actually Kyler's idea. So Kyler has requested the first pick in the NBA draft. So Kyler, let us know the team you're picking for, which prospect, and why.
Yeah, since this was my idea, I called this because I think these picks are the easiest, like throughout this mock draft, and so I don't have to make any of the hard decisions. So first overall pick is going to the San Antonio Spurs, of course, and they are taking Victor Wembanyama. I'm not gonna, you know, break the wheel or anything here. Victor
Now hot
Wembanyama.
take.
Yeah, he's the best prospect I have scouted. I've only been doing this for a few years, so it's not saying the biggest thing, but touted by many to be the best prospect since LeBron, and I don't think they're wrong. Just the flashes he's shown as a shot creator, as well as the immediate impact he's going to have on the defensive end with his elite length, listed anywhere between 7'3" and 7'5". But just be able to have a wing that and big that can basically do everything is making the Spurs a team that should be watched next year for sure.
What do you think the ceiling is with San Antonio next year with Wemby? Because I hear some people saying that Spurs should go all in and start to try to get good now. I've heard rumors that they may kind of be interested in the Chris Paul situation now that he's been waived. Like, how good do you think Wemby instantly makes the Spurs, or do you see him being as more of a developmental prospect? Because he's the consensus #1 overall pick, but is he going to make an immediate impact, or is it going to
I think
take
he's
some
going to
time?
immediately impact winning on the defensive side. I think offensively, he's going to put up highlights. I don't know if he's going to be able to instantly just like carry an offense. So that question honestly decides on what depends on what the Spurs decide to do around him, because I think he's going to need help offensively. But in terms of, like, I didn't even talk about the fit next to Sohan. Like, that defensive front court with Wemby and Sohan is something entertaining, which is why Spurs definitely went from like bottom tier watchable team last year. I don't think I watched a single Spurs game because I was trying to watch the Spurs. If I did, I was watching the other team. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be tuning into some Spurs. So I think first year, unless they make some win now moves, it's going to be more entertaining than probably winning basketball offensively. But just to see the way he's going to be able to bend opposing offenses on the defensive side, I think that's going to play immediately.
Love that. Wemby, he's going 1. Landon, did you have anything you wanted to add on Wemby?
No, I think you just about said it all. I think it's the easiest #1 pick we've had in a hot minute here. So congrats on drafting him.
It's a hard
He's picking the
decision.
draft.
So proud of you, Kyler.
Yeah.
And now this is where things start to get a little bit interesting, where we have the #2 pick. And just so our listeners know, we're going to pretend that there's not going to be any trades happening. We're just going to draft these draft picks based on where they're currently slated. because I know there's been a lot of rumors that the second or the third picks might be traded, but for the sake of this mock draft, we're just going to go with Charlotte and Portland at those picks.
This is also, we should say it's a predictive draft, not what we would do if we were the GMs of these teams, what we actually think is going to happen come draft night. Just because the point of this mock draft is to paint a realistic picture for what could happen with the Jazz, right? And so to do that, we have to actually try to predict the picks that are happening before them. So,
yeah. First off, I would just say I don't envy Charlotte with this number 2 pick. I think this is kind of a tough little choice for him to make here. But I think if I were them, I would go with Brandon Miller. I do think Scoot Henderson is the better all-around player, might have, more potential than Brandon Miller does. But I just think Brandon Miller would fit so well with Charlotte and what they're building already. I think he'd be a great partner to Ball out there. I think that really opens up a lot for him to have another floor spacer, someone who can kind of create his own shot. So if I were them, I would go with Brandon Miller at 2. Again, probably maybe a risk because I think that Scoot Henderson's potential is just so high. I just have a hard time seeing how they would incorporate him into what they're doing out there since they already have their point guard set for the long-term future. But I think Brandon Miller would fit seamlessly and I think make a positive impact right away for them. So that's who I would pick at number 2 if I were them.
I mean, for me, even though I have Scoot Miller and Scoot Miller, why do I keep doing that? Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller in the same tier. I do think Scoot is pretty comfortably ahead of Brandon Miller for me. And I would take him here. LaMelo Ball has not proved that he can impact winning at any really point of his career. He's a really entertaining player, but I also think he's 6'7", and you could possibly make that work. I think LaMelo's can catch and shoot pretty well. I think Scoot is a really good off-ball cutter. And so would it be a little bit uncomfortable to start because they're both used to having the ball in their hands? Sure. But I just think at the end of the day, I would rather build around Scoot than LaMelo, even though I really think LaMelo's fun to watch.
Yeah. So do you think they'd keep LaMelo as part of their long-term plan, or do you think if they draft Scoot,
you'd certainly try it for probably 2 years. I'd give it like a 2-year window, and if they can't work it out in 2 years, I'd probably trade LaMelo.
Which I think this is why you hear so many rumors about Charlotte trying to trade this pick, is because if you're a GM, which is terrible job security in general, you are looking at this saying it's easier to see the immediate fit with Brandon Miller, but you think Scoot might have the higher upside. Like, it's just so hard because it's so easy for Charlotte in this situation that if they make this pick, to make what's going to end up being the wrong pick for their franchise. Because even if Scoot is great, then doesn't mean that you devalue what LaMelo is to your team. Or similarly, if you take Brandon Miller and he's a really good fit next to him, but Scoot just goes off and becomes an all-NBA talent, then obviously you made a terrible decision there. So when you actually go through this exercise of looking at where Charlotte is in their roster, where they're at in their franchise, and what they need to do to start playing winning basketball, and the fact that they have the number 2 pick, I do not envy being anyone in Charlotte's front office right now because it's going to be so much harder for them to make what will end up being the wrong decision than making the right one.
Yeah. If Scoot goes off like we think it does, this could almost be like a no-win situation for him,
that's why I just take him. I feel like there's phases to a rebuild. There's just asset acquisition, then there's find pieces that fit together, then there's build around the edges. They are not in find the complementary pieces stages. They are one of the worst rosters in the league. You're in asset acquisition mode. I would take what I think is the best asset available. But it is a conversation, and a lot of people are saying Brandon Miller's going to go too, which they're in the same tier for me, even though I would think it would be a slight mistake.
Yeah. Which Brandon Miller going 2, that means Portland is on the clock at 3, and it's super obvious what they should do here. I think Portland needs to go full rebuild. I think they need to trade Dame. I think they need to take Scoot Henderson, and I think they need to build around the next point guard of the future in Portland. Dame had the best season of his career last year, statistically, and he's in a position where he could seamlessly fit into a bunch of other rosters that are trying to contend right now. And I think you could get a really good haul for him back. So I think it's very clear that as much as you love Dame and as much as I love Dame, I mean, I remember going and seeing Dame play when he was at Weber State. I saw him a few times in person when he was playing for Weber, and I loved him as a player, but I think it makes sense for both parties that Portland needs to start building around somebody who's not in their early 30s as a small point guard, and they need to do right by Dame and put him to a situation where he could potentially win a title. So I'm taking Scoot with the third overall pick. I think it's a super, super easy decision there in terms of what Portland should do with their franchise, and that's what I would do.
You don't think they
Yeah.
should try to make a Damian Lillard, Scoot Henderson backcourt work?
No, I don't. I really don't. I think that you're never going to get more value for Dame in the future than right now. Portland already has quite a few guards. I mean, they have Anthony Simons, they have Shaden Sharp. I mean, like they have guys who are going to be playing in that backcourt. So I would rather just do a clean reset because Dame is the guy in Portland and he's so beloved by the franchise that if he's there at all, I think it's going to hinder Scoot's development and just getting more shots, being able to get really, really comfortable in an NBA system. So I want to see what's best for both of these players, and that's Dame hopefully going to a contender and seeing if he can win before he retires, and that's Scoot being able to take the reins from day one because he does have that all NBA potential. He's an incredible prospect, and I don't want any player to get in the way of that development, even if it's a player that I love as much as Damian Lillard.
All right. I'm up at number 4. This decision is also easy, which is why I wanted the first pick, because my picks keep on being easy throughout most of this mock draft, if you ask me. I'm going to Amen Thompson here, the S tier athletes out of Overtime Athletic, Overtime Elites, excuse me. We have not really seen prospects come out of there. That's why I'm just like a tiny bit lower on the Thompson twins than most. I'm just a little bit below consensus on them because watching those games was difficult to me because the competition was not great, but just the raw ability of Amen is, as well as the upside that comes with that caliber of athlete, is too hard to pass up. Excellent size for a point guard. And what he maybe lacks in terms of shooting and maybe kind of just overall scoring outside of the paint, I feel like the Rockets have added pieces that are good in that area with Green and Jabari Smith. And so I think what they need is defense and playmaking, and that's Amen's calling card at this point in his early career. And so I think it's a perfect fit.
Yeah. Do you think he can be the guy to really kind of organize that team, at least offensively, be that playmaker? Because I see Houston as a team that has a lot of raw talent, but not a lot of discipline. I feel like they play kind of chaotically. Do you think he can be that guy to kind of help organize that offense?
I certainly think he has that capability. I also think the coaching change is going to help Ime Udoka over I forget the last guy's name. Who cares? He's gone. But I think they kind of just openly didn't respect their coach very much. And I feel like Ime Udoka, he's had his own personal issues that have been well documented. But yeah, I think coaching might help even more than a guy like Thompson, but having like a true point guard, because they had Kevin Porter, who's also just like a shot creator himself, having more of a pass first point, I think could unlock Jabari and Jalen and Şengün, because honestly, their best passer was their center last year in Şengün. And so being able to actually have a passing point guard, I think just unlocks your offense a lot more than not having one.
I think what's been tough for me just with watching Houston is that you see all that talent, but you don't see that kind of glue piece that makes everything work. Jalen Green has shown potential that he could be like potentially a scoring champion at some point in the league. Like he is that good as a scorer, but he's not good at pretty much anything else. And I think that if you bring in a guy like Amen Thompson, then he puts Jalen Green in his more natural role. And I think he's going to not only unlock him more as an offensive player, he will add much needed defense to their backcourt. And then a guy like Jabari Smith, who had a little bit of an underwhelming year last year with Houston, he's a guy who would certainly benefit from the type of pressure that Jalen Green and Amen Thompson would put on the rim, which would hopefully get him more involved in their offense as he's a knockdown shooter. So I think that this is a super easy choice for Houston at 4. Amen Thompson, they need a playmaker. They need somebody who can play defense. They need somebody to come in and change the tone of that entire franchise, along with Ime Udoka. And I just think that a lot of these young guys who have maybe struggled a little bit with off the court issues, I mean, like Kevin Porter Jr., we know about him. And we haven't really seen a lot of leadership out of Houston. So I think that Amen Thompson, by all accounts, he is just a fantastic guy. He's done great in interviews. He seems to be really sharp, have a lot of leadership quality. So I think he could come in and be the leader of the team from a very early standpoint, which I think could make Houston become like really set them on the trajectory of not just a rebuild of talent acquisition, but maybe to the point where they have enough guys that they can start playing winning basketball, even if they don't win a ton of games.
Awesome. Should probably start picking up the pace if we're trying to do a 3-part podcast.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Landon, you're up at 5 with Detroit.
Okay, 5. This is also, I think, an easy pick. If 5, I'm going with Cam Whitmore to Detroit. Good prospect, maybe the last remaining prospect that has like legitimate like star potential. I think he would be a great teammate to the guys like Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. I think he fits in really well with what they're trying to build. I love his versatility. I think you could play him a couple different positions. I think like Cam Whitmore, Cade Cunningham pick and roll type system would be a lot of fun to see. I just think that he would continue to help build with what they're doing, and they would be maybe one of the funnest teams to watch next year.
Yeah, I agree. Cam Whitmore, best scorer available, probably best upside as well. Like the fit as well, like you said, an exciting team. Sad to see Cade Cunningham get injured last year, but this could just add to the excitement.
And Detroit doesn't have a guard issue, so if you take over the guys who are still available at 5, a lot of them are point guards, so I think it makes a lot of sense, even just from that standpoint, that Cam Whitmore is a better fit for the roster they currently have constructed. All right, great pick. I'm going to do 6, and I would love to see Asar Thompson on Orlando. I think that would just be an insanely fun fit. If you look at Orlando's roster, they're building around Paolo Banchero, Rookie of the Year last year, and Franz Wagner, who has been surprising in how good he's been so young. So they already have 2 fantastic forwards that are kind of the cornerstone to their franchise right now. And I think unlocking Asar Thompson as that playmaking guy who, despite not having the same athleticism as his brother, he is a better shooter than Amen at this stage of their career. I think that he fits really, really well into that point guard role, and he's someone that they can build around long term. Markelle Fultz, I love that you've turned your career around and you've been a positive impact guy in Orlando, but I don't think you're the long-term solution for the team that Orlando's trying to build. So you want to unlock Paolo, you want to unlock Franz, you want to make them better players. Let's get an elite playmaker with them. And at this stage of the draft, I think that's Asar Thompson. So I'm taking Asar Thompson at 6.
I actually don't love the fit. And I did not like Orlando at 6 at all, which is why I wanted to pick first, because there are 2 picks in the lottery that I just have no idea what I would do, because I think Orlando has a lot of playmaking. I think Franz Wagner and Paolo are both really good playmakers. So I think what they need next to them is people who are more effective off ball. And you said Asar Thompson is a better shooter than Amen. Yes, he is. He's also still one of the worst shooters in the lottery. So I don't know. Like, I feel like the best fits are like the Casey Wallaces and the Grady Dicks. It's just too high, I feel like, to take those guys, which is why I didn't want to pick a 6 in this mock draft.
I don't hate Asar Thompson with this pick. I do think they need a point guard. They've been looking for a point guard for a while now. They've had a couple duds. I think he's probably a little more solidified than some of the other guys they've tried to draft. I think he could really be like a long-term starting point guard solution for him. Again, you don't necessarily need a shooter on that team right now. They've got some shooters. They got some guys who create their own shot. But I think someone who can kind of lead that offense, maybe put some pressure on the rim, open some spacing up for some other guys on the perimeter, is something that they could need. So I think Asar Thompson works pretty well for them, but it's just my thought.
I don't know how they were like either the worst or one of the 3 worst shooting teams in the league last year. They don't have shooting. They have guys that can create their own shot, but like mid-range and in. They cannot shoot threes. they need guys that can space the floor for Wagner and Pancaro, who are good shot creators and playmakers themselves. So I don't know. I guess we just watched a very different Orlando team. I watched almost as much Orlando as I watched Utah last year, and I think they need shooting.
Which I think part of why I took Asar Thompson at 6 is that Orlando also has the 11th pick, which we'll be getting to in just a few minutes. And I think that they'll be able to pick up more shooting at 11. So for now, I just think the upside pick makes sense. The playmaker makes sense because, yeah, I just think that's the most important need right now. And you can always get shooting later. Like there's a lot of guys who come available in free agency or guys are going to develop. They have a very young roster to be better shooters. So I do agree that shooting is something they need to address, but I think that there's a lot of avenues that they can address it, which is why I would go with Asar Thompson.
Very fair.
But
I just wouldn't personally.
All right. Fun pick. 7, Kyler. Who are you taking for Indiana?
Indiana, I think Indiana would really benefit from a player the caliber of Jarace Walker, and so I'll be going with him here. Just kind of like a wing, just defensive-minded player. They have a lot of shorter guys that they count on for their offense, and I think they are a better offensive team right now than they are defensive. And then with a playmaker the caliber of Tyrese Halliburton, I feel like it makes it a lot easier to play offense. And so, just get a defensive centerpiece. I think him and Miles Turner can play very well with each other. And I think he's also one of the best available. He's in that tier, so.
Yeah, good pick. I think he'd be perfect in Indiana.
Yeah. I was debating between him and Taylor Hendricks. I probably would have taken Hendricks just to slide over just because I like the idea of Indiana having a little bit more shooting on the perimeter, but I was debating between those two, so I think it's a great pick. I'm not going to fault you for it at all.
I would take Hendricks as well. This is a predictive mock. I think they would take Walker over Hendricks, though.
Both great.
I struggled with this next pick a little bit at 8, but I think I would probably go with Taylor Hendricks if I were Washington. I love his fit with Porzingis. I think that's a pretty complementary front court, and I think you could run a lot of kind of unique, versatile types of sets using guys like that who are both, kind of play big guys who can floor space, guys who can kind of create their own a little bit. They probably have like a point guard need, which was made this hard for me. But I just think Taylor Hendricks is the best available player on this in the draft so far, and I think that he could have as much of an impact as a point guard could for them. So I would go with Taylor Hendricks.
So that was what you would do. Do you think that's actually what Washington will do, though, if we're doing a predictive mock?
I think that's a very different question with this one.
Who knows what Washington does? I don't understand their reasoning for anything that they do.
It's true.
I mean, like, there's been tons of rumors that Cason Wallace has canceled all of his draft workouts after he met with Washington and that they're going to take him at 8. So I agree that Taylor Hendricks is the better prospect than a Cason Wallace. But if we're doing this predictively, I think there is a ton of smoke that Cason Wallace has a promise from the Wizards that they're going to take him at 8. So that would just be my one pushback here.
But he picked Taylor Hendricks. He is in charge of the Wizards. Which puts a wrench in the jet.
It's a better foundational piece than Cason Wallace, in my opinion. So I think that's what they would do.
I completely agree with that.
If we're doing what we would do, absolutely. If we're trying to predict the drafts, I feel like with Kuzma and Porzingis is probably their two best long-term pieces in their front court. I don't know if they would take Hendricks, but I also don't know that they wouldn't. So the Wizards just changed management. We have no idea what this management tends to look for in the draft. So easily one of the more unpredictable picks, and Landon is showcasing that here in the mock draft because even though everyone and their mother thinks they're taking a guard, they could not take a guard.
Yeah. Which, when I push back on you, Landon, I think you'd probably do a better job drafting for the Wizards and the Wizards front office. They've done a terrible job the past few years. So I think they should take Taylor Hendricks if that's who's available. I just don't think that that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to take the guard.
Yeah, we'll see. It'd be a mistake.
And now we get to Utah. I know that we've talked a lot on this pod in our previous episodes at length, where we've talked about Taylor Hendricks. We've talked about Jarris Walker and how we assumed that one of them would be available for the Jazz at 9, but both of them and Cam Whitmore have been taken. So at this point, I'm just going best player in the draft and got to take Anthony Black. He's another guy that we talked about in the first episode of the season. He is a big guard. He is a fantastic defender, and he's shown a lot of scoring potential. I think the Jazz, with their pieces in Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, getting a guard at some point in this draft is going to be extremely important. Someone who can play make for others and kind of be that floor general on offense. As much as we would love to get somebody like that at 16 as opposed to 9, I just think if you look at the talent disparity, it's really hard for me to say I'm going to take a Grady Dick or I'm going to take a Cason Wallace or somebody over a guy who has the potential of an Anthony Black. So I think the Jazz will be a little bit shocked if those 8 picks go, those first 8 picks, and they're left with Anthony Black as their best option at 9. But I think that he is the clear best option. So I'm going to take Anthony Black.
I don't know if it would necessarily be shocking if both Walker and Hendricks are off the board. I think there's a decent chance one of them is available. I also think there's a fairly decent chance they're not. Good pick. Best available on all 3 of our boards. I have all 3 of our boards pulled up. 6th ranked for both JR and I, and then a 9th ranked for Landon. So consensus best available. You're not going to get mad at the Jazz for picking that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point it'd probably be between Anthony Black and Cason Wallace. I think Jazz definitely need that, point guard position. When your backup point guard is Taylor Horton Tucker, that's clearly a position that you need to have addressed. But I mean, Anthony Black is the most talented. It probably has the higher ceiling of the 2. So it's hard to argue against that.
All right. Well, we've taken the Jazz's first pick. Let's go to another team that really does need a point guard. Tyler, who would you pair with Dallas?
Do they? They still have Kyrie. He's not gone yet.
Yeah. I mean, technically he's not gone yet.
I think
I'll believe anything with Kyrie when I see it.
I think I mean, if I was the Mavericks, I would absolutely take Cason Wallace and not even think twice about it here. But if I'm trying to be predictive here, the Mavericks might be under the assumption that they're keeping Kyrie at this point in time. And so that makes this a lot more difficult, because if you are under the assumption that your big 2 is Luka and Kyrie, you're not probably taking Cason Wallace right now. Who do you take? I'm tempted to take Derek Lively, if I'm being honest with you. Give them a really solid defensive piece, which they need if they're going to be building around Kyrie. You know what? I'm going to do it. Let's shake this mock draft up just a little bit here. Derek Lively is going to go 10 to the Dallas Mavericks. I don't love the pick. He's 26th on my board. Definitely not what I would do kind of player. But if you're looking for an impact defender, this draft has not gone the way of the Mavericks. They, like Utah, are probably hoping for one of Hendricks or Walker to fall to them if they're assuming to be keeping Kyrie, because that's just a better prospect that also offers the same defensive upside. But they're gone. It's really, and like Derek Lively in consensus rankings is more a lottery pick, so it's not nearly as much of a reach for most as it is for me.
I can't fault you for that. I think he definitely helps them out as far as their defensive issues go. He's the best, big man available now. I would still be really tempted to take Cason Wallace for them. Mainly because I don't even know if Kyrie's going to be part of their long-term plan. So they even want him to. I mean, I know they had a small sample size yesterday, but it was a disaster when Kyrie was playing, especially with Luka. So I would almost take Cason Wallace, maybe keep Kyrie a little bit for a season or 2, maybe, have him take Cason Wallace under his ring, become, like Kyrie's protege, and then see if he can find an opportunity to trade Kyrie at some point and move Cason Wallace up.
Yeah, again, I would take Cason Wallace. I made that clear. We are not doing what we would do in this mock draft. If you're Dallas Mavericks and there's already rumblings about like you got to appease and start winning with Luka right now, selecting a backup point guard isn't going to help you win next year. Selecting a center that actually plays defense, which they don't have on their roster, is going to actually help you win next year. So you're getting into the part where some teams, this is the duality of the draft. Some teams are long-term roster building. Some teams are trying to win next year, and that absolutely influences how you draft.
I'll be quick. I love the fit. I love the defensive mobility. I think he fits seamlessly next to Luka. I have him in the early 20s on my big board, but I think he makes a lot of sense for Dallas trying to win now. So good pick, Kyler.
Not a good pick, but could be one that happens.
Good pick considering the circumstances. Landon, you are up at 11.
Okay. Assuming Orlando already picked up Asar, I would probably have them take Grady Dick at this point. I know I'm higher on him than both of you guys are, but I think he would fit very well with what they need, especially at this point in the draft. He's probably the best shooter in the draft. Could help with those 3-point concerns that you talked about. Someone who can move off the ball, someone who can space the floors for their other guys, give them the opportunity to create their own shots like they like to do. I just think the fit's too good for them to pass up on Grady Dick.
Great pick for me. In my eyes, he's ranked 13th. You're picking him at 12. The value's there. He's in the right tier, and just what this team needs. Going back to last year I was very heavily invested on the Pistons, but then Cunningham got injured. So now I'm very invested in this Magic team. I would almost rather have like a Taylor Hendricks plus Cason Wallace draft from them from 6 and 11. But either way, you get the shooting, which I think is very valuable. Good pick.
Love the fit. Fits perfectly with what they're trying to do, and he feels a position of need. That's exactly what I would have done as well. I hate this pick at 12 with Oklahoma City.
That was the other one I hated. That's why I wanted to not be third.
I don't like this at all. I was hoping that Grady Dick was still going to be there because if you look at their 2 point guards, they're Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and they're Josh Giddey. So they don't really have a lot of outside shooting in their backcourt. So I would love to try to get some sort of shooter for them, but I don't know because I feel like all the great shooters are a bit of a reach.
Do you have Jordan Hawkins? Oh, you have Jordan Hawkins way low.
Yeah, I have him lower.
Jordan Hawkins.
God, I hate this. I'm gonna go. You know what? I'm just gonna go with my gut. Kobe Buffkin. We've talked about him a lot at other points of the draft. He's a guy who's shown a lot of two-way potential. I think he would fit really seamlessly in with a guy like Giddey and a guy like Shai because I think he can play both on ball and off ball. I think he's a really good defender, which will help bolster their backcourt, and he's shown enough shooting potential that I think he could be valuable to their long-term plans. Oklahoma City is still trying to figure out who's going to be part of their long-term build, but I think that he's a guy who could play point guard, he could play 2 guard, and I think he could just be somebody who could be really valuable if something ends up happening with Shai or Giddey, or you just need a little bit more versatility in the backcourt. So I don't love the pick, but he's the one that feels right.
I mean, I love the pick. I love Kobe Buffkin. So him going as high as he needs to, I'm fine with.
Yeah, I think the farther along we've gone here, the better Kobe Buffkin's looked. It's not a bad pick, I don't think.
All right. I'm up now with 13. Toronto Raptors. I think this is a pretty good Jalen Hood-Schifino spot. If you ask me, the guards are coming off fast and furious at this part of the draft, which I think is a very good likelihood come draft nights. They like to have size all across the court. He's definitely a plus-sized point guard. And with the uncertainty surrounding the future of Fred VanVleet, I think Jalen Hood-Schifino could come in and play point guard for them next year. I think he is an NBA-ready prospect.
Yeah, he fits what they're trying to do size-wise for sure. I think he kind of fits their cool concept of having, positional length all across the board. I'd still be really tempted to take Cason Wallace with this spot just because I think he's a better player at the point guard position.
I disagree. Oh, that's why I took Jalen Hood-Schifino.
I mean, I like just if you compare the prospects side by side, I like Casey Wallace a little bit better than Jalen Hood-Schifino, but I think that Toronto is one of those few organizations that may have Hood-Schifino ranked above Wallace just because of the positional size, which they really seem to value. And I think if you look at how Toronto struggled ever since Kawhi left, having a smaller point guard, which Casey Wallace is great, but he is a smaller point guard, has definitely been an area that has hurt them a little bit, especially with their backcourt. So I think that as they continue to grow with the new head coach and with kind of a reset now that Fred VanVleet is leaving, I think Jalen Hood-Schifino is somebody who fits really well next to Scotty Barnes, next to Pascal Siakam if he's going to stay there, next to OG Anunoby. So I think that from a fit standpoint, from a size standpoint, that he makes a lot of sense for that roster. So I really like the fit, which means I like the pick.
All right.
All right.
And then because I'm picking for New Orleans. I'll take Casey Wallace at point guard for New Orleans. I think New Orleans needs a point guard. CJ McCollum is not the answer. And I think Casey Wallace can bring some, defense that they probably need in the front court. And I think he can hopefully help unlock some of Zion. If Zion comes back and is healthy, I think he's good enough passer to kind of help Zion get into positions where he can be successful as well. I think Casey Wallace works well with Pelicans.
Yeah, I agree. I think they need a point guard, and they got a couple guys to like to have the ball in the hands, which is a situation that I think Casey Wallace would certainly benefit from. So, good pick.
I agree. Atlanta, I do not like any of my picks. All my picks are hard after like the first couple for me. Just looking at their roster, you have Trae Young, you have DeJounte Murray, and then you don't really have a whole lot else that you would say these are guys that I really want to build around. AJ Griffin had a pretty good rookie season, and then you have John Collins, who ever since his finger injuries really not been that great, especially at shooting the basketball. At this point, I would just want somebody who can be an impact player right now if you're still trying to win around Trae, and you definitely need more defense surrounding a guy like Trae Young. So in this situation, I'm going to take Bilal Coulibaly. I think it's a little bit higher than a lot of people have them on their big boards, but I think it's hard to deny the fit with somebody who's 6'7" with a 7-foot wingspan, who projects to be an impact defender right off the bat or like immediately. And I think he's someone who will be able to score quite a bit because Trae Young, despite his other flaws, he is a pretty excellent passer. And I think that Trae will be able to get Coulibaly a lot of those cuts that he was getting when he was playing with the Mets 92. So once again, I think this might be a tiny bit of a reach when it comes to talent compared to the general consensus, but I just love the idea of Coulibaly coming in and playing alongside a guy like Trae Young and helping shore up some of his weaknesses, which is the defensive end of the floor, and then really being able to develop next to such a great passer in Trae Young. So once again, I don't love this pick, just I didn't love my pick at 12, but I think it makes a lot of sense for where Atlanta is currently at.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised you don't love the pick. He's 12th on your board. He's also 16th on Landon, so it's not too much of a reach for you guys at all, really. And honestly, the consensus is continuing to go higher. I'm assuming we're going to talk about him in the big board because he is one of the more divisive players. I'm pretty much significantly lower on him than you guys are, and I have reasons as to why that is. But for you guys and for a lot of people, that's where he's going to go.
I mean, I am acting if I'm trying to be predictive, not if it's me personally.
Yeah, but even predictive, everyone's putting him in the lottery these days.
He's getting closer, yeah. A lot of people do have him in the lottery now, but
I saw there was a post on Bleach Report's comment section where some guy just looked at 15 different mock drafts and to see who the Jazz were taking at 9, and tied for the highest person mocked to the Jazz at 9 was Bilal Coulibaly.
Really?
So yeah, he's being put in the lottery very consistently.
Good. I'm glad people are getting smart on him. He's a great prospect.
He's fine.
That fit with Atlanta, I think, is too good to pass up. I think that's a good choice.
I agree. The fit is really good.
So now we've drafted 15 guys, and now we get to the Jazz's pick at 16, which is where it gets kind of interesting because there's not a ton of players that, I mean, like there's a lot of good players, but a lot of the ones that we were hoping would still be there for the Jazz, I don't think are going to be there. So now the question I ask for you is that assuming the draft does go this way, who is one of the players that you would want the Jazz to take a look at? Also keeping in mind that in this mock, Anthony Black was taken at 9.
I would take either Derek Woodhead or Derek Whitehead. Derek Whitehead, I cannot say his name, so that should be fun. Should he come to the Jazz? Or Jet Howard would be the two players that I would be considering if I were the Jazz at this point.
Yeah. I would maybe look at locking up their backcourt and getting someone like Jordan Hawkins.
Interesting. I mean, like I know that I'm lower on Jordan Hawkins at the consensus, so I wouldn't personally want to do that. I mean, like me, I would love to see us get a forward type, maybe someone who's got some length and some upside. Leonard Miller, I think from the G League, might be somebody who has the size and the defensive versatility and enough flashes of offense that I think could be a really interesting fit. I think he's someone who could play alongside Kessler and Markkanen, which he's not as polished as a lot of these players that you've talked about, but I don't know, like from a long-term perspective, he might be a guy that's willing to take a swing on at 16.
I don't hate Leonard Miller. I would not be a fan of Jordan Hawkins for the Jazz. I think Jordan Hawkins, it would be a much better fit elsewhere. I also just like, is he going to be better than Ochai Agbaji long term as the two? I don't know. I feel like Ochai showed flashes last year that make me, if I'm gonna already planning to replace him, I'd rather have higher upside than Jordan Hawkins, who's really just a shooter at this point in his career.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're interchangeable at the 2 and the 3 if you wanted to do that, but
They're both
again,
they're both I think too small to play the 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. This is kind of like this would be definitely a bit of a weird draft. I mean, we would see Cason Wallace fall. We would see some interesting fits in Toronto and in Atlanta. The Pelicans, it's going to be interesting to see what they do because all the Zion drama the last couple of weeks, there's been rumors that Zion is now on the trading block. And we still don't know if the second or the third picks are going to be traded before draft night or on draft night because those have been out there for weeks now that they could potentially be available. So just as we wrap up kind of this mock draft segment, is there anything that you find surprising when we actually went through this exercise that maybe you weren't expecting previous to doing this 16 mock draft?
I think the biggest surprise is that Cason Wallace was the 4th of the point guards taken. General consensus is he's not going to be that. He's going to be the 2nd probably after Anthony Black, or maybe even before Anthony Black. That I could see not going that way come draft night for sure. But it's fun to see that, hey, it's a good thing we got Anthony Black because we really need a point guard, and none of them were there when 16 came around. So maybe we should be hoping for Anthony Black more than those defensive forwards.
I certainly would not be upset. I love Anthony Black. Landon, what about you as we were going through this exercise? Was there anything that came to mind that surprised you as we get really, really close to the draft?
Nothing too shocking. I mean, maybe Derek Lively going as high as he could. It makes sense for Dallas, but I guess that just comes from the shock of having, all the other defensive forwards taken before Dallas has a chance to pick him, which I think if that is the case, that puts Dallas in a bind. I think Dallas making a pick like that would really shake up the rest of the draft. So probably
I also think they could trade
one.
it. We didn't do any trades. I feel like if that happens, Dallas might look to trade for a defensive wing or forward or even big. But I mean, Derek Lively in a lot of he's going like late lottery, maybe not top 10, but late lottery, late teens. So a little bit of a reach, but there's always surprises come draft night, which is why I love it.
Yep.
Which I think what was surprising for me is just I kind of had my mock draft built out beforehand where I felt fairly confident that my picks weren't going to be that difficult. But for me, like half of my picks, I was like, man, if I was a GM, I would be looking to trade down like in some of these situations because there would be guys I would like just as much or very, very closely that I could probably get 4 or 5 spots later. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see who's going to be willing to move up, who's going to want to move back, because just the amount of talent you have and the fact that there's so many good defensive point guards at the front of the draft, and then there's like none the rest of the draft and these defensive forwards and everything else. I think those teams that are looking for a position of need, they're going to have to reach in their pockets a little bit if they're going to want to take any of these impact now guys. But if you're not looking to win now, there's so many guys with upside that you would love to get in the late teens and 20s. That could be really, really great long-term projects. So I think we're going to see several trades between now and the end of the first round that are going to really shake things up in a fun way for the NBA in general.
Yeah, this will not be a draft class I would put money on. So there's a lot of stuff that could happen.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Victor Wembanyama at 1, which I don't even know what odds you could get on that. It's probably not even bettable at this
Probably
point.
not even bettable.
That's the only thing you can feel confident about.
Only thing. But that'll take us to the end of this first segment. We were going to take just a super quick break, and then we will be back with talking a couple of draft would you rathers. All right. Segment 2, we're going to be going over some of our draft would you rather questions, where we're going to be asking our other co-host, would you rather have this happen on draft night or this happen on draft night? This is going to be a quicker segment. We each only have one that we're going to be sharing with the group. But let's go ahead and start off with Landon. I know how your mind works, and you're a very deep thinker, so I'm excited to see what kind of a would you rather question you prepared for me and Kyler.
Yeah, I think what I would want to know is, would you guys rather cash in most of our valuable assets and get ourselves, a superstar player like a Luka Doncic, Jaylen Brown, maybe both, but give up?
Holy shit.
We're not drafting till 2042.
Exactly. Or keep our assets and see if we can build something organically. So I guess the idea, would you rather cash in for proven superstars or take the risk with our draft assets going forward in our cap space?
Yeah, I'll answer first. I think for now, I'd rather be drafting, just because I don't know if our depth is yet at a point where we're a Luka Doncic away. I could have a separate podcast talking about how much I would want Luka Doncic, because he's a one-way player, and I just think that's really tough to win with in the playoffs. So there's certain guys that became available. I think you just got to take advantage of when a superstar of a certain caliber becomes available, and Luka certainly could be that caliber of player. But just generally speaking, I think you still got so many years left of this rebuild that we're probably a year or two away from making that move, let's say.
I mean, I've said this before on previous podcasts, but if you are an organization, everything you do should be built around trying to win a championship. And I don't see how you can win a championship with a Luka Doncic or a Jaylen Brown, at least at this stage in their career. Luka Doncic doesn't play defense. He's had to play himself into shape every year. He argues with refs. Like, I worry about what that means for your culture. So as much as I love watching Luka play on the offensive end of the basketball court, I don't think that giving up a ton of assets for him right now is what's best interest in your for your franchise if you're trying to win a championship. Jaylen Brown, he's the best player in the league who can't dribble. Watching him in the Eastern Conference Finals, it was embarrassing how often he was losing the ball, and his turnovers and his inability to create his own shot while dribbling was just honestly a little bit shocking that he's been in the league for so long and he's such a talented player. But he was just getting destroyed, absolutely destroyed by the Heat's defense because of his inability to dribble. So for me, I would much rather build to the draft right now. I have a hard time seeing how Luka or a Jaylen Brown makes your team anywhere close to a contender given what we already have right now, given that they both have very, very obvious flaws that I think prohibits you to at least some extent from playing winning basketball. So love the players individually, but I don't think we have the infrastructure around either of them that they would need to win a championship. So I'm a hard pass on those.
Yeah. I think I'd agree. I think one thing I remember being taught in business school is if you're going to fail fast and fail cheap. If you go cash in on these like superstars, you're typically picking up expensive long-term contracts. And if it doesn't work, you're stuck with it for however long, their contracts are before you can really actually begin your rebuild. Whereas I think if you have draft picks and some of them turn out to be busts, you can not sign them to an extension. You can draft other guys. You can move on pretty quick. So yeah, I think in general, I'm just not a fan of cashing everything, leveraging everything you had for a couple players that you don't know is going to actually work out.
I'm not against the idea in general. I think there are certain assets that are worth that. Like, let's say Milwaukee disappoints again next year, and we had a couple of really good draft picks. Now we can put Taylor Hendricks and whoever we drafted, right, and add a Giannis, who is a legitimate two-way impact player. I would do something like that, But I just think we don't have what Jim was talking about, the infrastructure around that player yet. So I don't think the depth on the roster is already established enough that the star player alone would put us there. I think it's definitely something the Jazz should do at some point with all these draft picks. I said that so many times, we have more first-round draft picks than we have roster spots in the next 5 years. So we're not going to be able to spend them all. And at some point, you're going to have to consolidate. It could be consolidating up in a draft, or it could be consolidating for a star. I just think we're too early in our rebuild process to consider it, unless it's like a Giannis type player where like all you really need around him is shooting for him to succeed.
It's a fun question, though. It's a fun thought exercise. All right, Kyler, you as well. I know you can get creative with these type of things, so I'm excited to hear. What's your would you rather?
Mine's not too spicy. Mine's draft related. Mine has been all in the drafts. I know free agency is just around the corner as well. I haven't even put that much time into that. Would you rather not come out of this draft with a point guard? No point guard selected. Or would you rather not come out of the draft with anybody who's going to be a good on-ball defender? If you could only get one of those skills, which one would you rather come out with in this draft? Two skills the Jazz need desperately, but you're only getting one.
So the question was, would I
rather not have a point guard in this draft, or would you rather not have anybody that's a good on-ball defender? Probably the Jazz's two biggest needs. Let's say they only fill one in this draft. Which one?
I think for me, I would rather not have them get a point guard. For me, means having someone who's a good on-ball defender. I think that's a more immediate need, just because of the way the Jazz play offense. They have a very kind of, I guess, democratic approach when it comes to playmaking. They do a lot of off ball. They run a lot of sets outside of like the post area. They do a lot of point guard by committee. So it's obviously a need, but I think their defensive issues are far more pressing.
I'm struggling so hard with this question. This is a great would you rather for me. I think I'd rather have the point guard, and here's why. I don't think Colin Sexton or Jordan Clarkson or anybody else we have at the point guard position is going to put us in a position where we're going to be playmaking enough or running offensive sets well enough that I worry that we're not going to be develop our players as much as they need to offensively, especially our younger players like a Walker Kessler. So, and this is such a deep point guard draft. I think that it's going to be really hard to get the value we could potentially get out of a point guard in this draft as opposed to potential future draft picks that we could get. And on-ball defenders you can get through free agency, even if it may not be of the same caliber. So for me, just looking at the long-term prospects of the Jazz, if I'm trying to rebuild, I would love to get our point guard of the future now, just continue to develop and create some chemistry as an offense and really learn to trust each other. And then I think I would worry about the defensive issues later, even though I do agree it's a more pressing issue right now. I think just for the long-term development of the team, I'd rather get a point guard.
Yeah, and I agree with both of you, which is why for me it's tough. At the end, I would tend to actually lean with J Bobby though, just because for this draft class specifically, this is the best point guard draft class I've personally come across. Where not only do you have guys that have skill sets that you like with the defense and the playmaking, but they also have plus size. Like a lot of the like once you get after like the top 5 picks, if you're picking a high end point guard, they're undersized guys in most drafts. So this is just a really weird draft for good sized point guards who play really good defense and who play make really well. And so I can get that on ball wing, that's gonna defend that other team's best guy every night. In other draft classes, I can get it other ways. I feel like there's a couple good players that we've talked about ad nauseum, at 9 for that. But after that, it's going to be hard to get that in this draft class anyway. And I feel like this is not like an above average draft class for that skill set specifically. And so I would rather take the rarity that is this draft class and take a point guard.
I guess the good news is those skill sets kind of go hand in hand with a lot of the best point guards in this draft.
Yeah, but like those are like guard defenders. Typically, when you're talking about like your primary on-ball defender, he needs to be able to guard the threes and the fours because that's who runs this league mostly. You love to have a guy who can guard the other team's point guard, but typically when you talk about like your on-ball defender, it's usually like a wing or a forward. But I guess I didn't clarify that, so that was my bad. But yeah, I meant like the primary defending wing. So I think there's a decent chance we can come out with both, but there's a chance we only get one, which this mock draft was that. We got the point guard because the defenders were already gone at 9, and then we didn't get the defender. Because we were talking about getting Jordan Hawkins and Dariq Whitehead and Jet Howard and Leonard Miller, who's fine, but he's not like this elite defensive prospect. He's good, though.
No. Great question. I like that one a lot. All right. So now here's my would you rather for you guys, and I'll preface just a little bit into why I wanted to ask this question. Ever since the very beginning of when Philly got eliminated, there's been talk of Harden wanting to go back to Houston and that he just loves living there. He loves the city, and he would love to go and see if they can build around the core that they already have of Jabari Smith, Şengün, Jalen Green, and he could come in and kind of be the leader of that role. If that happens, would they potentially want to try to gather more picks that they could use in future deals, or does it really make sense for them to take like a guy like Amen Thompson? So I see them as a potential candidate to trade back from 4 to try to acquire more capital that they could potentially use in future trades. So this is my question. Would you trade 9, 16, and 28 for number 4?
I don't think Houston would do that, but in this hypothetical, would I trade the whole draft for Cam Whitmore?
Or Amen Thompson?
For me, it would be Cam Whitmore over Amen Thompson. I have Cam Whitmore as 4 and Amen as 5 on my board. But yeah, they're the same tier, so it could theoretically be Amen Thompson. I'd be less excited if it was Amen than I don't know. They're in the same tier for a reason. I'd be equally parts excited. Right, trade this draft. I would do it honestly because we've gone through the exercise, and 16 might not be as exciting as I once thought previous in this draft. When I was doing 2 would you rather, because I thought we might be doing 2, one of them was similarly going to involve how much less confident I am 16 is going to be a really good player. So just because 16 is not the shiny young star that I thought it once was a couple weeks ago, now that it looks like the guards keep going up people's draft boards. Why do people get smart late in the draft process? It makes me mad, but I would do it.
Yeah, that's a tough question. Yeah, maybe for the sake of argument, I'm going to say no. No, I still think there are going to be some good prospects at 9 and 16. You don't quite have that star potential that you would have in the top 5 for top 6, however you look at it. but you could still get some very, very good role players and kind of help round out the rest of your roster so that at some point, given maybe future draft pick or consolidating, getting a star, we're going to get that star guy who's going to help lead us to a championship. But I think we could take this draft as an opportunity to fill out the rest of the spots and kind of make everything else look good for when we finally get that tier one player. Because I don't think there's going to be another draft like this for this quality of role players.
Yeah, it's like I had a tough time with this one as well. But essentially, what I came down to is that if I could get a combination of like a Jarris Walker and a Kobe Buffkin, then yeah, I'd rather have 9 and 16. Or if I could get like an Anthony Black and a Bilal Coulibaly with 9 and 16, then yeah, I'd rather have that. But just as we get closer and closer to the draft, getting two players that I know I'm going to like at those positions just is seeming less and less likely. And I would rather, like, if you're the Jazz and you're like, you will definitely get your whoever the fourth guy in the draft is, your pick, whether that's Amen Thompson or Cam Whitmore or even Asar. Some people have him ahead. You know what you're getting and you know what you can build around. And I'd rather have I know that I'm getting a great prospect with all-star potential rather than potentially getting a guy that you maybe don't completely love at 9 and maybe you're kind of disappointed that a guy didn't fall to you at 16. So it's close for me, but I would probably go all in on whoever the fourth pick is and really try to get somebody that can be a really high upside guy.
I mean, just to continue this exercise, let's say we have the gift of foresight and the draft is exactly as our mock draft was. We'd be trading Anthony Black, and for me, it was Dariq Whitehead. For J. Bobby, it was Leonard Miller, and for Landon, it was Jordan Hawkins, plus whoever your 28th guy is, which is Maxwell Lewis for J. Bobby. It is City Sissoko for me, and it is Dariq Whitehead. Wow. Yeah, Dariq Whitehead's actually available at 28. Goodness. No, we're not. That's cheating. Jaime Hawkins. Actually, it is Jaime Hawkins because you're skipping row one. So would you trade those three players for Cam Whitmore or Amen Thompson? Anthony Black, whoever you guys picked in your own personal opinion at 16, plus whoever you have as your 28th rated prospect. Are you trading those three for Cam Whitmore or Amen Thompson? I am. Like you said, there's a theoretical world in which the Jazz have a really good combo package at 9 and 16 that we really love. In this draft, it didn't happen. The draft is crazy. The guys that you think you're going to get might not be there. And so, like, Landon brings up a good point. It's like build around the edges and start getting more core pieces. But I'm actually less impressed. I feel like this draft might be a little bit overrated in terms of its depth. It has good depth. But like after the lottery, like the guys in the 20s, I feel like are the same quality that they usually are, if you ask me. From the last three drafts I've scouted, the guys in the 20s are as good this year as they have been in the previous years I've scouted. Like Maxwell Lewis isn't better, who's like my goal pick at 28. He's not a better prospect than LaMarcus Daniels, who was, I always say, what's the guy's actual name?
Wasn't that your 2K player?
Yeah, what's the guy's actual name? I can't always say my 2K player's name. What's his name? The Timberwolves forward.
Oh, Jaden McDaniels.
I don't know why I always call him LaMarcus Daniels. But like, I liked him better than I like Maxwell Lewis. And that's kind of the guy that I was hoping for the Jazz to pick in the late 20s. You know what I mean? So I just feel like it's not a special draft after the lottery, really. Even maybe the top 11 or 12 guys.
All right. And a Woj bomb just came in to my phone literally right now as we're recording. So instead of doing big board comparisons, let's take a few minutes to talk about this trade that just came through and what it could potentially mean for the NBA, because I think that will be more fun than talking about our big boards. Bradley Beal was just traded to the Phoenix Suns. Oh, wow. As of right now, we don't have any details on what that's exactly going to look like, but you now have a big three in Phoenix of Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant. So I'm just going to ask the question, should they now be the favorites in the West now that they traded Chris Paul for Bradley Beal? Well, not traded Bradley Beal for Chris Paul, but now that they replaced Chris Paul with Bradley Beal.
I don't know. I think they still need some strong role players because that lacks a lot of defense. That big three. It's kind of I honestly feel like it's very similar to that Brooklyn big three that Kevin Durant was just a part of, like a ton of shot creation, and that didn't work out for Kevin Durant. Like, there's that. Why I kind of didn't like the Sar Thompson. I guess so. We're bringing full circle here to the Magic is like you can have too much of like players who their strength is like the same. You need complementary strengths like on your roster. Or like a Sar Thompson was just another playmaker to a lineup that has a bunch of playmaking. And I feel like shot creation, shot creation, shot creation. Sure, you can ISO everybody in the league all you want, but what else are you going to be good at? Um, and so I think it's a very intriguing big three, and I don't hate the move by Phoenix because it is an upgrade from Chris Paul. I just think, man, that's a lot of people who all have the same strengths on the same team.
Yeah, I don't know how much that moves the needle compared to what they were a season ago, if I'm being honest. I mean, they gave up all their depth for Kevin Durant. That hasn't changed with Bradley Beal. Now they're out the playmaker who's going to be point guard for them next year. I think they need to solve that issue. Could be wrong. I mean, talent has won out a lot, but I think that right, this is going to be a circumstance where the ball can only be in one person's hand at one time. They're not going to have the depth of the role players to match up and defend other good teams in the West.
I honestly like this trade board for the Wizards. They finally are hitting reset. Like, hallelujah. I like this. I really like this for Washington. I don't even know if they got any assets for Bradley Beal, but please move the needle one way or the other. And then it looks like they're finally doing it.
Which, like, Phoenix has now had their new owner for like 6 months, and Matt Ishbia has already done a huge trade for Kevin Durant where he probably overpaid a little bit. Then I don't know what the deal is going to look like for Beal, but I think he's owed something like $200 million over the next 4 years or something just absolutely asinine. So they definitely have a high ceiling because with those guys, you can score an insane amount of points. But I think this kind of comes back to what we talk about a lot just when we talk about roster building and construction in general, and why we love doing off-season podcasts is because we want to see a team that can build sustainably where they have complementary pieces and where a team can work together where the sum is greater than, or sorry, just like the team in general is greater than the sum of the individual parts, where they actually help each other get better and complement each other's skills and create a team that is so much better playing together than they would be as individual players. I think we've seen that with teams like the Warriors the last several years, seeing how Draymond and Clay and Steph, how they've been able to make each other better. I think you see that with Jokic, and you've seen how Jokic and Murray were able to help make like a guy like Aaron Gordon become a way more valuable player than he was a couple years ago playing in Orlando. So I think this is actually a very interesting thing to happen right before the draft is because you see one team building philosophy of just go all in on top talent, just try to get as much talent scoring as possible, but not actually thinking about roster construction and complementary strengths. Because I would agree with Kyler and with Bueland in that I don't know if their ceiling is really that much higher because I worry about their ability not only just to stay healthy, but their ability to play a form of basketball that will keep them competitive in games because teams are going to be able to score 120 points on them every night.
I mean, Kevin Durant's shown good moments defensively, so that's not like he's not like a bad defender. I don't know how much time we should put on this though. It's a Jazz podcast, but yeah, fun trade. Yeah. Shaking up the top of the West is always good. The top of the league in general.
I agree. It's refreshing to see Washington do something and commit to one direction.
That's honestly, I think, is a bigger takeaway than Phoenix adding Bradley Beal, if you ask me.
Yeah. Which that will now do it for the end of this podcast. We are so excited for the draft. We've now, I think this is the 5th episode where we're talking about draft related material. And this Thursday, we are going to be stoked to be watching the draft with each of you and seeing what the Jazz's future is going to look like. We are planning on dropping a reaction video on the Jazz's picks, either on Thursday night or sometime on Friday. So keep an eye out for that, where we'll be able to break down just the Jazz's draft in general and give you our thoughts on who they drafted and where. And we will be back to you with another episode next week talking more about free agency. As always, if there's any questions you want us to tackle, feel free to drop it in the comments. Please leave us a like and subscribe to the podcast. It really does help us out a lot. But this has been another edition of the Upper Bowl Perspective. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you post-draft.
Ciao.